Hi, this is Mark Marshall with Anatomy of Tone. In this lesson, I want to discuss using tension tones such as the ninth and how they naturally want to resolve, and using this in your improvisations when you're trying to tie some maybe different modes into playing over a chord. And for this lesson, we're going to use an E minor seventh chord. And this conversation came up today as a student is looking for some less than traditional ways maybe to improvise over the verse of the song Superstition from Stevie Wonder, which is based on E minor pentatonic riffs. We looked at what other modes could work alongside while that riff is playing, which really just actually contains all the notes of the pentatonic scale, just not in a direct order. Before we get to that, if you're digging these lessons, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button and leave a comment if you have any questions. You can also find me at anatomyofguitartone.com, where I have a lot of articles on guitar tone and various gear and other lessons. Let's discuss what you will actually be learning in this lesson. So we're going to learn how to take a pentatonic scale and add one additional color tone to that to just give us a little more to play with, to maybe not make it sound like we're just playing with the pentatonic scale. And that tone is going to be the ninth. So we're going to learn about using various nines, either a flat nine, a sharp nine, or natural nine, and where they want to resolve. Now, my mentors use terms like gravity. Now, each note has gravity and wants to fall a specific way. I think of this much like water likes to find its own level. So there will be certain notes in a scale that either want to resolve upward or downward, and if we want to have resolution, then we go with the flow. And sometimes you don't want perfect resolution, so you may leave things hanging. The point is for it to be tense and unresolved. But I've noticed that one thing amongst improvisers and composers that are lesser experienced, they don't have a good perspective on what I call controlled dissonance, which is knowing how to resolve or basically frame your story so it has clear endings. We're going to start off by looking at an E minor 7 chord. Now, the notes that are in an E minor 7 chord are E, G, B, D. I'm just going to use this as an example, even though in Superstition we happen to be playing E, G, A, B, and D were our notes for the riff. We're just going to vamp over one chord in order to hear how these tensions should resolve. The first thing I'm going to do is play an E minor 7. Now, I'm going to play it on a piano because on a piano I can sustain a chord and play some pitches on top of it, which makes it a wonderful way to study note resolution and just modal playing, right? So if I play an E minor 7, I'm going to play an octave up. Now let's talk about what the natural 9 is over this E minor 7. It's an F sharp. Right? The interesting thing about the natural 9 for me, whether it's over a minor or a major chord, is that it's kind of like Switzerland. It's neutral. It could go in either direction. I think it really likes to resolve upward best because it's half step away from the third, but it equally resolves well down to the root. So I'm playing a chord and I'm just playing a single note against it to hear how tense it is, and then which direction I go by step in the scale or mode I'm in, and which one is the better resolution. Now, that was just using the F sharp, which also exists in either the Dorian or the Aeolian mode. But what if we wanted to stretch out a little bit more and use something like Phrygian, which then would have a flat 9 in it? Right, it's a much more of a tense note. Now, the flat 9 likes to resolve downward, and we can hear that. We have that tension, and then we have the release. Now, if we move it upwards, we try to resolve it upwards. It still sounds tense. It does not sound resolved. So the natural gravity of the note is not moving upward for a flat 9. And this goes over dominant as well. I'm playing E7 dominant now, so if I go, it's kind of dissonant. There we go. That's a nice resolution, right? Now, if we're playing a sharp 9 in a dominant chord, it likes to resolve upward, basically to the natural third. Now I'm just going to hold down this E minor 7 chord. I'm going to play some riffs on top. I'm going to start with using the natural 9. Now I'm going to use the flat 9. Now I'm going to use the sharp 9. So take some time and just get used to listening, whether you're playing a dominant chord or a minor 7th chord, the 9th, and which way it want to resolves. This will help you when you're trying to improvise and use it, and that's going to make a lot more sense out of modes. Now, the one thing I should mention is it doesn't apply when you're using passing tones. So if I'm playing a minor 7th chord and I'm just running up the scale, I can run past that flat 9 fine if I'm in Phrygian. I could run past the natural 9 if I'm in Dorian, for instance. So using it as a passing tone in between two consonant tones is a little bit of a different purpose, I would say, than what I'm talking about, which is using it a lot more. In some ways, it feels more isolated rather than it being sandwiched in between two resolved notes. I'm going to switch to Sibelius so we can see what this looks like on paper before I do a guitar example. All right, I have Sibelius open now. I'm going to write a few examples out here. So here's what we're talking about. If we're thinking of playing over an E minor 7, actually, let's just start with the E7, and we're going to talk about the flat 9 here. And if I play an F natural here, I have my keypad set up here, F to E. Now, this flat 9 likes to resolve. Flat 9 to 1. 9 can go either direction. We can go F sharp to E, so this would be 9 to 1 or 9 to 3. So these are the options that we have over an E7 chord. Well, actually, there is one more option. Let's do this as a sharp 9. We're going to have G is going to go to G sharp. All right, so this is sharp 9 to 3. This is the strongest resolution. I'm saying you always have to do this. Again, it's a matter of tension release and deciding when you want to build tension, when you don't want to build tension. Okay, I've made some adjustments to the tablature so you can see a little bit more on just using one string about where these intervals are. It's a little trickier on guitar. I think this is why piano is good to have some basic understanding of when you're learning music theory, because it's laid out in a linear fashion, so it's a lot easier to understand. Let's look at the minor chords now. So I'm going to say E minor 7 is we're gonna play over here. So we could do a very similar thing. Let's look at E minor 7. So very similar situation with E minor 7. I'm just going to change some of the notes here. And we could do, this will be natural 9, so we could do the F sharp to G because this is like a Dorian or Aeolian. The first one is like Phrygian. Actually, I could put that above here. So the E7 with the flat 9 is derived from the diminished half-whole scale. The natural 9 over an E7 is derived from the Mixolydian. The sharp 9 comes from the alt scale. These are the scales or modes that these tensions are deriving from. These modes or scales are where we're deriving these tension tones from. Let's look at what modes we're using to get the tension tones on the minor chords. The first one is Phrygian, and the second one is Dorian or Aeolian. We get derived the natural 9 from, which again can move in both directions. I'm going to record an example. I have a click track set to 78. I like to play it rather slow, and I'm gonna play it more like a singer-songwriter 70s vibe as opposed to completely approaching it from a jazz perspective. So let's set this up to record in my tape recorder here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right there, I was only using the flat 9 in a downward motion. I made sure that every time I hit, if I landed on it, I resolved downward no matter what position I was in. Right? There was one spot in there I did do a bit of a scale run. Right, and now I talked about earlier that when we're doing runs that we don't really have to think about the resolution so much because the flat 9 or the natural 9 is acting as a passing tone. Again, I'm only using notes from the pentatonic scale plus the 9th, E, G, A, B, D, but I add the flat 9 in there. Now I'm going to use the natural 9, which is derived from the Dorian or Aeolian, to play around with the 9th and resolve it either up to the 3rd or down to the root, because it kind of works in both ways. But let's hear how that works out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Really, we're just touching on the tip of the iceberg. I just wanted to plant some seeds to make you aware of this technique and consider it. Now, there's other intervals or tensions that we can get into discussing about where they naturally want to resolve that are important to learn. It's best to just start with one at a time and really take it and listen to it, observe, and try to consider how you would use it instead of trying to take on too much information at once, because we really want to savor each one of these resolutions to have a great understanding of where the gravity is pulling it. If you'd like to get deeper into this concept, I'm available for private lessons. You can reach out to me at anatomyofguitartone.com. We can chat and see if we'd be a good match for lessons.